When I was in graduate school at Berkeley, it was completely different in that all the Vietnam protests were going on. And if you went to campus and they had the recruiters out, the students were going like Indians around the army, and they would prevent people from going in to get recruited. And then at that time, Reagan was governor, and he would drop gas bombs or tear gas bombs on the campus to break up the students. So you had to run to the classroom and put your hand under a water fountain, to keep from getting tear gassed. And it was completely different. There was a guy there that was sued the school so he could go to school naked, and won. So he literally went to school naked, which is crazy because it does get cold there in the winter, sort of like here. But and being from Texas, we were always in jackets and things like that. Then you end up going to classes where nothing was barred. Went to a photography class and walked in, and they were having their presentations, and this one girl had decided to film her vagina in various positions and dimensions and stuff like that. So here you are from conservative Texas going, okay. So there were things like that happening that and nobody cared. Then the World Future Society was starting to happen in San Francisco, and the students then demanded a course on future studies, and they didn't have one at Berkeley. So the dean called me in. He said, "You're the only person I know that's crazy enough to offer that class." So I had to start doing a lot of research on the futures and stuff like that, which led me into probably giving over 20 talks at the World Future conferences over the years. And then I teach futures, in my classes here. It led into a lot of different things, a lot of experiment. And most of it was creating knowledge, which changed the way I teach all my classes here. Because in undergraduate school, it was like you follow certain things, you learn certain things, and you regurgitate them back on the test. And these were what you did. There, it was the opposite. It was like you find out new things, you create new things. So that's what I do in my classes here. The thing that drew me to Texas A&M, I had been working as an architect in Houston, and one of the people I worked with that ended up being best friends was starting to teach here. And the dean was looking for somebody that could break up the status quo, that was more experimental. And so he quickly called me and said, "Come here." And so I came, and the dean said, "You can teach anything you want, any way you want. You can create new courses. You don't have to follow, the regular path." I was thinking of going to Houston in a year or two, just getting established here and then opening up my own business. But I ended up just falling in love with teaching and the students and everything else. So I ended up staying here and developing things and doing unusual things in the courses that haven't been done before. Like in the classrooms, we had glass walls in, and so I was into a lot of meditation and doing other stuff. So I had kids laying on their desk on drafting boards, doing centering exercises, stuff like that. And the dean quickly had all the janitors put a butcher paper over the glass walls, so administrators walking by, our visitors couldn't see in to see what we were doing. And so we did a lot of stuff like that through the years. And I would bring in books, and most of them were, these were drawing studio classes, and I would have them read books on creativity and futures and stuff like that. One project I did for grants was there was a week in the fall there where it was in between major projects. So I said, okay, create a happening on campus. And it can be anything. You don't tell me what it is. You come in and explain to the class what you pulled on the rest of the campus. And then two guys came in that were in the Corps, and they said, "We can't tell you what we do or we'll get kicked out of school." And so I went, "Oh, okay." So after class, they went back to the office with me, and they'd gotten a couple of beers down them. This was Friday, and the next day was Saturday and it was a night game. So they went and got some red and blue spray paint. And then they crawled up the light standards in Kyle Field. You know, the police did come in and they showed their lights, but always down. And they were up there spraying the lights like American flags. So they figured Saturday night when all the lights came on, there'd be all these American flags flying around. So anyhow, they finally got back down. Unfortunately, didn't fall to their deaths, and went, back to their dormitories and just passed out. So the next day about noon, they got up and they said, people in the hall were saying, the police are stopping every car trying to leave the campus and opening their trunks looking for red and blue spray paint. And what had happened, the band had gotten out to play. And anyhow, one of the band guys looked up and went, oh my God, look. And so they called, the janitorial staff, who went up there and tried to, scrub off the paint, and it was a real hard paint. They couldn't do it. So they had to call down to Houston to deliver like $10,000 of lights up, and then they had to replace those lights, before the night game. So they were keeping real quiet about it. The College of Architecture at that time was considered the liberal area of the campus to be avoided at all costs, from a lot of the people. And like when I was doing the panels at the MSC, the wood carvings, I'd gone over to the Corps to borrow some braids and brass from the Corps, and I was coming back over here because I wanted really good copies of it, to put in the wood carvings. And I got stopped by the Associate Dean of Agriculture. And he says, where in the hell do you think you're going with those, boy? It was like, and so I had to explain it. And he said, they should put a 40-foot wall up around the College of Architecture to keep you from, infiltrating the rest of the campus. So anyhow, it was that sort of attitude was going on. Interacting with the students and finding out what their creative talents were, and then helping open up their talents so that they could become anything they wanted to. It was it's really rewarding to watch people develop and blossom into really great things, and which several of them have. Let's see, in the MSc, the 100-year history of A&M, which is about 70 feet of wood carvings that depict the history of A&M. I had to do all the research on it and then carve it, and that was about 2.5 years in doing that. And then Highland Park Methodist Church on the SMU campus, I did all of their carvings and research for them, designed all their furniture, and that was one of them. Then in the Core Center, did all of their carvings, did the bronzes in front of the MSC for the buster and silver taps. I guess as awards go, presidential professor. I'm one of the few on campus that have that award. And then a Piper Professor Award, which is like they award that to the top 10 professors in the state of Texas each year. And it doesn't matter what discipline you're in. And I'm the only architecture prof in the state of Texas that's ever gotten that award. So as far as those achievements, right now I'm working on a mace for the Maine School of Business. So that's keeping me busy. Plus, I'm working on just keeping up with my courses for future studies. In the futures, you can't go the same lecture every semester. You have to update it because things go out of date. So you have to constantly keep in touch with where everything's going and create the futures. I'm real curious about where the future's going and where everything's changing. We're changing so rapidly now at an accelerating pace. Unless you look at where the future's going, you can't direct your students and to the past or the present. They have to look to the future, and you have to help them create the future. Mainly, I want the students to become everything they can be, whatever direction they want to go in, and leave them with a mindset that they can do anything they want to do, and they can be happy going into any field they want to go. So essentially, that's where I push them and try to open up their creative potential so that they understand that they're very creative and they can go in any direction they'd like. Both my mother and father were very creative. So we just were brought up thinking that way. It wasn't anything unusual. When I was 5 or 6 years old, I started playing around with a garden. And by 7 years old, I had taken over the gardens in our house. And my parents built a greenhouse for me there, and started growing really exotic plants, from seeds. And I really got off, to growing things, making cuttings, unusual plants. And we seemed to have a simpatico relationship. Actually, I would probably go into a futurist tirade of where everything's going, and looking at 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the line, what they need to look for. And your generation is going to see more change than any generation in the past. I mean, already your cell phone is more powerful than the supercomputer when you were born. So it's like, and that happened in that period of time, and it's accelerating. So, 20 years from now, it'll be, multiple times that.